The TV shows we watch can leave a lasting impact on our lives for better or for worse, and if you know anything about me, you'll know that I've watched a lot of TV shows in my life. That being said, in this video, I want to talk about 5 TV shows that have left an impact on my life for the better and why they mean so much to me. Before I jump into my list, I want to know what TV shows have impacted you in a good or bad way, which you can do by dropping a comment down below. I look forward to reading them all. Now, this first show is probably a staple of most people's lists, and that's The Office. I had seen a lot of different clips from this show when I was younger, but I was never allowed to watch it because it was too inappropriate, which, looking back, was definitely a good call. Thanks, Mom. I finally watched the show for myself over the summer of 2018. I had just had a birthday, finished my sophomore year of high school, and I was ready to watch some big kid shows. I'll admit, I had a rough time watching the first season, as most people do, but once I got past that, I was having a great time. I found myself constantly laughing at Jim's pranks, cringing at Michael for doing who knows what, and rooting for Jim and Pam to end up together. I think I got through the entire series in about 2 months, which shockingly enough isn't a record for me. After finishing the series, the only thing I wanted to do was watch it all over again. I loved so much of the show, and it brought me a lot of comfort over what was a really stressful and depressing summer. I still watch The Office to this day, albeit mostly through YouTube clips and compilations since Peacock stole it from Netflix. But I find myself still laughing and cringing to those clips because The Office is just that good. The Office also gave me my favorite sitcom couple of all time in Jim and Pam. Now, this may come off as a bit biased, but I think Jim and Pam are the best sitcom couple of all time, maybe bar Chandler and Monica, since the will they won't they ends when they actually get together. Their relationship goes through a lot, especially in the later seasons, but I personally like it all as it's a very realistic portrayal of relationships. I would say The Office changed my life by giving me an example of what relationships should look like and a really inaccurate idea of how the workplace functions. On the topic of sitcoms, the next show on my list is Community. This show was a recommendation from my ride or die Jackson Glass in the midst of the 2020 quarantine. He said I'd really enjoy Community, to which I was a little skeptical since I'd never heard of it before. I'd seen a meme here and there, but I didn't actually know what show they were from. But I trusted Jackson and took a chance starting a new show. I downloaded the first 18 episodes on Netflix for a car ride to Florida, and I'll be honest, I didn't expect much, but the first episode really hooked me. After watching the pilot episode, I knew Community was different. It was that refreshing take on sitcoms I had been looking for and hadn't found since finishing The Office / Parks and Rec. For the rest of that 8-hour car ride, my face was glued to the screen watching every episode of Community I downloaded. When we got to our halfway point hotel, the first thing I did was get on the Wi-Fi to download more episodes for the rest of the drive. Now, despite being on vacation and spending a week at Disney, I managed to binge watch the first 3 seasons in 2 weeks. Fun fact, Jackson actually hadn't finished the show yet, so as I was binge watching, I passed where he was at and finished it first, despite him starting it months before me. One of the things I loved most about Community was how the whole study group interacted with each other despite their differences, something I ended up experiencing in college myself. I grew up in a very Christian setting. Most, if not all of my friends were Christian, my family is Christian, and most of the other people I'd encountered were also Christian, so going to film school was one of the first times I had been in a worldly setting. And much like the study group in Community, my college friends and I had varying backgrounds, religious and otherwise. But despite those differences, we were still able to be a really tight friend group who hung out, played video games, watched movies, or just chilled and talked. Aside from that, Community very quickly became a comfort show for me. I always find myself turning on an episode when I'm sick or just feeling down and want to have a good time. I've rewatched Community 2 or 3 times now, and I'll most likely end up watching it again before the end of the year. I know this isn't really a recommendation video, but if you haven't watched it already, check out Community. All 6 seasons are on Netflix, and I guarantee you'll laugh at least once. Alright, if you know anything about me, you'll know that it's weird for me to be this far into a video without talking about anime. My Hero Academia was one of the first anime I ever watched, aside from Dragon Ball Z and the original Speed Racer. When I started this series, I was still relatively new to anime, so I didn't quite know what to expect. This series showed me what anime could be, and propelled me to watch more, and eventually lead to where I'm at now, having watched dozens more anime. At this point in my life, I was going through a very similar situation as Deku. I'd finally discovered what I was passionate about and what career I wanted to pursue, only to be told that it was dumb and impossible for me to even try. But despite all that negativity, I pushed forward and worked hard to achieve my dreams, which I did last year when I graduated from film school. There's more to my story with My Hero though. It's kind of a right place, right time series for me. The anime carried me through the rough start of my junior year of high school, while the manga helped me get through my first real breakup. Do those things sound somewhat inconsequential? Sure, but My Hero Academia has always been there during some of the lowest points in my life. It's the one series that I can count on to cheer me up, help process emotions, or just get me pumped while watching a fight scene. I won't sit here and say that My Hero is the greatest anime of all time, because it isn't. But it is my favorite anime of all time, and that's enough for me. This next show you're gonna have to hear me out on, okay? Lego Ninjago is genuinely one of my favorite shows of all time, and I think it's one of the last good kids shows made. I first stumbled upon Ninjago way back in 2013 while browsing Netflix. I saw Legos and ninjas, which seemed like a cool enough combination, so I gave it a shot and got hooked almost instantly. The concept of these Lego characters being ninjas with elemental powers, fighting snakes and riding dragons was so cool to me as a kid. Which I guess was the point. I remember making my own custom Ninjago figures with the spare pieces I had before actually owning any of the Ninjago sets. I was so into Ninjago that I watched almost every single episode post season 2 pirated on YouTube. Thanks for nothing, Cartoon Network, which was a hassle because none of it was in English. Later down the line, I made a ton of Ninjago videos on my Lego YouTube channel, even starting my own original stop motion series. I was building my own custom vehicles, writing stop motion stories, and just enjoying this really high quality kids show. I'll be honest, I'm not really into the newer Ninjago stuff since it just doesn't feel the same as what I grew up with, which sounds like such a boomer argument. And I can't wait to force my kids to watch it since it'll probably be the only good show left. We've now reached the last show on this list, which should surprise no one if you've listened to the podcast. Star Wars: The Clone Wars is my favorite show of all time and is ultimately responsible for who I am today. Star Wars was that one thing that everyone thought was just a phase, but here I am some odd 13 years later and still love it. After watching all 6 movies, I thought I'd seen everything Star Wars had to offer, until I saw a 30-second commercial on Cartoon Network for The Clone Wars. And if I missed one, it really sucked because these were still the days of cable and we didn't have a DVR, so I'd have to hope that there was a rerun before the new episode came out. I also went to my local library. Gosh, this part makes me sound so old. Libraries, cable, DVRs. I also went to my local library and checked out the Clone Wars movies, which, yes, I know isn't great, but as an 8-year-old, I was sufficiently entertained. I kept that Clone Wars movie checked out for months at a time and rewatched it twice a week. As I got older, the Clone Wars became a constant in my life. It was something I could always look forward to every Friday and got insanely hyped for the new season. I was devastated when I found out that Disney had axed the last 2 seasons and were ending things at season 5. I actually started my first ever YouTube channel just to talk about the Clone Wars finale. I was also really into that online game Clone Wars Adventures, if anyone remembers that. The Clone Wars is the show that inspired me to be a storyteller. It also built my childhood and turned me into the Star Wars fan that I am today. The final episode of the series dropped on Disney Plus on May 4th, 2020, which was the day before my 18th birthday, so it felt like my childhood show was really sending me off into adulthood. Things really came full circle for me last year when I got to meet Ashley Eckstein, Matt Lanter, and James Arnold Taylor, who voiced Ahsoka, Anakin, and Obi-Wan respectively at a convention. It was so surreal to meet these people who voiced some of my favorite characters and ultimately helped shape me as a person. Honestly, I could make an entire video gushing about the Clone Wars, and maybe I will one day, but I'll keep things a bit more brief for this video. Star Wars: The Clone Wars is the show that has had the biggest impact on my life, and I am so thankful that I got to experience and enjoy it as much as I have and will continue to in the future. With all that being said, these are the 5 TV shows that have left the biggest impact on my life. As I mentioned earlier, feel free to drop the shows that impacted you in the comments below. I look forward to reading them all. Now, if you're an avid TV watcher, then I suggest you check out this video where I talk about Serialized, the app that'll make it so much easier to track your favorite shows.